All right, everybody, welcome to the Stageable State of the Stage podcast. My name is Benjamin Reed, and I am the founder of Stageable, and I am joined here by a very special guest, the founding artistic director of the American Globe Center, Mr. Jim Warren. Jim, welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Man, I'm thrilled to have you. This is exciting. So, Jim, obviously I know you very well, but my audience may not know you very well. So would you just take a moment to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your career and what you've been up to lately?
My name is Jim Warren, and I think the place to talk about my career is that when I was an undergraduate at James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia, I met a Shakespeare professor named Ralph Allen Cohen, and we worked on a student production of Henry V. And we spent half the year in a seminar studying Shakespeare staging editions and how Shakespeare's company might have performed Henry V. And then we spent the second half of the year putting on Henry V. And I may not have been the shortest Henry to conquer England and France, but I have to be among the top 3 or 5. And that experience as an undergraduate was so much fun in my senior year that I suggested to Ralph, we should start a professional company using these ideas. And so my career started right after undergraduate with no intention whatsoever of making it a career. We just thought, hey, Shakespeare's plays are really cool when you perform those plays under the kinds of conditions that this genius was writing for. And what we found was that people liked it. And people who think they hate Shakespeare liked it, and Shakespeare scholars liked it. And so that began this, what I call a great big snowball, where we just went to play. We didn't have a space. We were trying to be a touring company. We wanted to go anywhere we could and recreate Shakespeare staging conditions in any kind of hole in the wall or large place to show how much fun Shakespeare was. And within a few years, that was 1988. And within a few years, we had been to 47 U.S. states, 5 other countries, 1 U.S. territory, and the District of Columbia, because this stuff just worked. And eventually, people came to us wanting us to build a theater. And so we considered a whole lot of options, and I could go into more detail about any of that, because when you push play on me, I will talk forever. But eventually, what we did was we moved from Harrisonburg, Virginia, which was our base, to Stanton, Virginia, 30 miles south in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. And we built the Blackfriars Playhouse, the world's only recreation of Shakespeare's indoor theater. And we opened that theater in September of 2001. Not the best time to start business, but it was where we were. And by the time I left my old company 30 years on, we had built that operation, the touring operation and the Blackfriars operation, to be a $4 million annual budget. And I left that company, going on 8 years now ago. And I have been directing and teaching and consulting and doing all kinds of cool stuff I never got the chance to do because I was there with my own company. And I have started a new project with a former actor of mine to build a recreation. And once again, it's the same phrase, the world's only recreation of Shakespeare's 1614 Globe Theater. And we're working on a project to build that Globe in Connecticut and create a Shakespeare campus that not only has the Globe as its centerpiece, but also has a performing arts and education center that has a big thrust main stage, has a black box, has a ton of workshop space, and we are trying to turn Connecticut into Shakespeare Central.
Cool. And so you right now happen to be in Virginia, but you are heading to Connecticut. You were just saying in the pre-podcast meeting that you are on your way to Connecticut. What are you doing there?
I've been trying to live in Connecticut as often as I can during the year to make this project happen. So we've been working on this since 2021, when my former actor, Tom Evans, who is the executive director of the American Globe Center, He lives in Stratford, Connecticut, and there was an old theater there, the American Shakespeare Festival Theater, that had a long life from the 50s into the 80s, and finally shut down in the 80s because they were poorly run. And if we talk about the state of the stage, we can talk about how badly theaters are often run. They shut down in the mid 80s, and there have been several projects to try and revive that theater over the decades that never took hold. And in January of 2019, arsons got in there and burnt the place down. So my former actor, Tom Evans, from his house could watch that fire because he lived that close to that space. And he decided that he wanted to get people together from that community to do a festival that says, hey, we should rebuild on this property. We should do something extraordinary to bring the arts back to Stratford. And that's when he called me. And I've been directing all over the country. And he and I started talking about, well, if we were to do something on that land, what would we want to do? And he knew that I'd been talking about the 1614 Globe for a long time with my old company. And so the idea of creating a Shakespeare campus, something that you can do Shakespeare staging conditions inside this globe and do plays by Shakespeare's contemporaries, new plays written for those conditions, or classic plays that would get that treatment. And we can create a huge menu where we can do all kinds of things indoors all year round, play with lights and sound and do things that go beyond Shakespeare staging conditions and create what we think might be the most far-reaching Shakespeare festival in North America and maybe the world because of the number of plays that we'll be putting on in rotating repertory. So we were looking at Stratford as the place to do this, and that piece of property that is beautiful in Stratford, Connecticut, is owned by the city. And so we set about trying to convince the town, the city council. I'm sorry, it's a town. It's not a city. So it's the town council. In Connecticut, we usually refer to them as municipalities because you're not sure if it's a town or if it's a city, and they're often very picky about that. Right. So we were trying to convince the town council and the mayor, and eventually the town council said, we're deferring to the mayor and letting the mayor make the call. And the mayor finally met with us and said, we think your project's too big. We don't want that influx of tourism. Mm-hmm. Which also meant we don't want the millions of dollars of economic development and huge education and all of the stuff that comes with this big project. They just thought we want Stratford to stay small. And so the great thing about that, and I often say, thank God for unanswered prayers, that we started to open up to other municipalities. And we met with state officials who pointed us to a bunch of different places. And that's where we hooked up with Norwich, because a lot of state officials said, you might consider Norwich because it is this small town on the river. It's actually where three rivers come together. It's up from New London. So it's built on a river that is spelled just like the one in London, England, but they pronounce it Thames instead of Thames. If we build there, we may be trying to change that. But we started talking to the economic development folks there and the mayor there, and we've been working for the last year on getting drawings done and getting infrastructure done, getting state senators interested. We've met with the U.S. senators, have both heard our pitch and seem to think this is a great idea. So everything is geared towards Norwich right now in Connecticut. Although we haven't signed on any dotted lines yet, we haven't stuck our flag permanently in the sand there. So we're still entertaining offers from other folks, and we're still taking meetings in other places in Connecticut. But Norwich is in the lead, and Norwich feels a lot like Stanton, Virginia did 25, 30 years ago. Imagine this beautiful small town, but it's on a river. And the plot of land that we're looking at is right there on the river and is gorgeous and would be a picturesque place to have our theater campus in a small town that has two huge casinos. Mohegan Sun is less than 5 miles away on one side, and Foxwood Casino's less than 10 miles on the other side. So millions of people are already making their way up there. We think that we could tap into some of that casino audience, but more than that, it just shows that that area of Connecticut, though it's not on I-95 and it's not on Amtrak right now, there are still millions of folks finding their way there. So we think that it is a incredibly viable, awesome possibility for us to build this destination theater where people come from not only locally, regionally, nationally, but internationally to see this 1614 Globe recreation that we're working with Peter McCurdy, who helped build the Globe in London that is there now, that is modeled after the 1599 Globe. We think that this thing just by itself, that building is a tourist attraction that people will want to come see even before they see the exciting theater we do inside it. So yes, you push play and I spoke.
That's great. Well, here, I'll challenge you to boil down the essence of what have we, at a fundamental level, what's the point we've been missing as an industry, and at a fundamental level, what have you done in the past that has connected with the audience?
I'm not shy about my opinions. So to be as incredibly clear and blunt as possible, I believe theater is dying. I believe it's dying all around the world, particularly in our country, because theater has spent so many decades trying to be film on stage. They're trying to be movies. They're trying to give the spectacle that movies can do better than theater. That as soon as we got away from, in the English-speaking world, the Globe Theater and Shakespeare's Indoor Blackfriars, those were thrust stages where shared light lit up both the stage and the audience was part of the world of the play. The English theaters kept that system up even once electricity was introduced and all of Europe was going to turning the lights out on the audience. The English-speaking audience didn't do that for a long time because there's something fundamentally different about the audience being part of a world of a play and in that shared light, and the difference between that and when you turn the lights off on the audience and you're asking them to look up at another world that is on stage in front of them. And as soon as movies came about, every theater that wasn't already a proscenium stage with the audience only on one side looking through that fourth wall, if they weren't already built like that, then they all changed to be built like that. And I'm not saying that that's not a viable way of doing theater. You can do that. You can create great shows. But the problem in 2025 and beyond is that an audience today can watch their computer screen and see a square in front of them and watch people do stories in a way that is far more effective for the makers and the audience to afford. There is no reason for them to go back to our modern theaters that have reopened since the pandemic and are just feeding them the same stuff. I do not believe that there is a viable market long-term for being movies on stage anymore. Maybe in the extreme circumstance of Broadway houses that shove millions of dollars into their productions and have the Back to the Future car drive on stage, have the Miss Saigon helicopter come down. Maybe something that huge will still be titillating. What I think that Shakespeare was onto 400 years ago, that we need to go back to the future to make part of our contemporary theater world, is tapping into the imagination of the audience. Shakespeare wrote into his plays what he wanted audiences to visualize. And so you can't do Shakespeare in a modern theater with big, huge sets and do Antony and Cleopatra that goes from Rome to Egypt to the Mediterranean, back to Rome, back to Egypt, back to Rome, back to Egypt, with changing big sets behind you without taking a lot of time to do it. He was writing what we would call cinematic theater for the language to allow the audience to imagine things. And to me, that's what theater does that streaming doesn't do, that movies don't do, that those big Broadway houses don't do. And I think that that is not a secret sauce, but a secret weapon to creating entertainment that creates community every night in every show, where the audience is invested because they're a part of the world of the play. They're Hamlet's confidant. They're Cleopatra's court. They're Henry V's army. They're part of that world going on that journey. And to me, that's what modern theater doesn't do anymore. And to me, that's why people are not going back to the theater. That there's no reason to get off your damn couch or your office chair when all you're going to do is go to a movie in with live actors not doing movies as well as movies can do them. And so that's what I think, using Shakespeare's staging conditions, I think that it creates a connection with the audience that people crave, whether they know it consciously or only know it subconsciously until they get there. I think that our computer world that has connected us as a community across the planet still lacks the warmth and the humanity of being in a room together, going on a ride together. And so I think that that's where, both economically and artistically, the future of live theater can provide stuff that nothing else can provide, that an audience is craving. I think an audience wants to be part of that community. And so I don't even know if I answered the question.
Yeah, I think you did.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's that, well, so from what you just said, the mistake we've been making is attempting to conflate the expressive format of film in theater and not distinguishing that these two formats are inherently different, and they scratch different itches, they do different things, and while they are similar, they are distinct. So yes, we're telling stories, but we're telling them in different ways, and to different groups of people. And that when you're telling a story to an audience that is in the same space, there's a fundamental difference to your sense of belonging to that connection, not only to that group of people, but to humanity in general.
Yeah. One of the things that I think that people who haven't seen theater in shared light, haven't been a part of a live theater audience where they are part of the world of the play, the best analogy that I can think that more people get inherently is the difference between watching a live concert film on your computer versus being in that club, being in that arena, being in that stadium. I thought that the way Taylor Swift's people filmed her Eras tour, I thought that was brilliant filming. And if you couldn't be there, that was the next best thing to being there. But wouldn't all of us who enjoy Taylor Swift rather be there in person than watching it on a screen? But doesn't Taylor want all of her fans that can't be there in person? Doesn't she want to give them as close of some flavor of that as possible? And I'm jumping the gun to get to where what we can do with Stageable is that thing as well. But I'll be honest, there are a lot of acts performing music that if I can be in that room with them, I would choose to do that. There are some I'm okay with watching it on the screen. I don't need
Yeah.
to be there. But I'm also not feeling the same things as if I am in the room. It is different. And so the art of theater making, I believe that in some ways we've become beholden to the technology and try to make our live shows more technically complex to compete with movies and to be more like movies. Uh, and I point to the Miss Saigon thing. I point to the Phantom of the Opera dropping of the piano. That there are spectacle things that have titillated audiences, that have sold a ton of tickets, and that makes everybody want to try to do that. They don't have the money to do that, and it's also a different thing. It's that audience is not surrounding that stage. That audience is not a part of the journey of the characters. They're watching from a distance. And I think that there's something better we can do that film can't do, and that those live movies on stage can't do.
Well, I feel like the very first problem is that we have this tendency to conflate these things and treat them as if they're the same. So when you were talking about the Eras tour and being there in person versus the way they filmed it, and then I was thinking of a third example, which would just be a music video, fully produced music video. And it's like, okay, these are different expressions intended for different audiences and who are consuming this story or this content in different ways. And so like we first have to recognize that, like, who are we doing this for needs to be our first question.
But using that example, are those different audiences?
Well, so what I thought of was, you were saying how wouldn't everybody want to be there for the Eras tour in person? And yes, I agree. But then I think about what you said about what Taylor did for those who couldn't be there. So any number of reasons why someone can't be at an Eras tour via, the availability of tickets. Maybe they are not able to leave their home for whatever reason. Mobility issues. Maybe they're located in a place where this concert isn't coming to and they can't get there physically. So that's like that. There's that audience, the people who can't get to the in-person, and there's the other people who can. And it's like,
right.
I think you hit it though on the, Taylor has the resources and the ability to take that event and translate it into a format that can reach that other audience and make it feel like you were there, or are there. And that's very awesome. And I think that the people involved in that must have had that in mind. And I think that's so amazing that we have the ability to take something that was special and geographically specific, and we were able to translate it and include a new audience into that.
Yeah, and I think that closer to theater home is how Disney shot Hamilton to put it on video. I thought, that's a lot smaller scale than the Eras tour, in part because it was a smaller stage as opposed to filming this giant stadium thing. But I thought that the way they shot Hamilton, it did not include the audience. And that show does not include the audience, even as much as Taylor's concert does.
Right.
But they had great lighting, great angles. They brought you there in a way that is unusual. And I believe that those two things represent different ways that the electronic medium has been able to take a live event and make you feel like you're there in a really cool way, and show that it's possible. And part of what we've done as a theater industry is we did all kinds of things virtually during the lockdown. And we made things available. And then even as theaters started to open up again, they kept doing some streaming things. And now pretty much almost nobody does streaming because they
Yeah.
decided that is a threat to their to getting audiences to come in person. And that's where I think that what you were talking about, what about the people who can't be there? And part of what we're building for in Connecticut is the idea that we want to be able to create streaming that we know is not as good as being there. But like Taylor, hopefully it's the next best thing, and it gets people to want to come. It gets people to want to save their money to make the trek to Connecticut. Or with what we're doing with the American Globe Center, it gets them to look for our touring troupe. Maybe their touring troupe will be closer to them. So that will be their gateway drug into our style to then come to our home to do it. And so I think there's a lot of things going on that make artistic sense, but also make money sense to serve more people and create a larger community of people that dig this stuff and want to be a part of things, even if that means they're doing it through their computer screens before they can be there in person.
Yeah. So I think the interesting thing about that is when we lower the barrier to entry, I think that's a good thing, because I think about, so I'll tell you a progression that I recently went through. I started listening years ago to a jazz singer called Catherine Russell, and just loved her voice. She's got a great voice. She's got this very, old world feel, but modern, and she's got tons of soul. She's a great singer. And so, it started with Spotify and, just looking up her albums and listening to them maybe as I'm cooking dinner or in the car. And then, the more I kind of fell in love with her voice and with her music, then I wanted it on vinyl, right? So then I order a few of her records on vinyl, and now I can, I love vinyl. I love being able to, pull it out and place it and hit the button and all the, the little experiences surrounding it and the warmth of the sound. So now it's, okay, now I've got this album and it feels like I'm another step closer, right? So when I play it at home and I'm listening to it on vinyl, it's like, oh man, it sounds so great. And her voice is amazing. And how incredible that this artist is able to, press a record, and little old me can sit at home and listen to it anytime I want for as long as I want. And Catherine Russell doesn't have to be in my living room in order for that to happen. But anyway, so then, vinyl and loving her. And then I'm like, oh man, I just want to be there to see her. I wonder if she's touring. And I look up the dates, and sure enough, this was over Valentine's Day weekend. She's playing in New York City at the Birdland Jazz Club. And, it was the spur of the moment. My dad also loves her. So, I'm texting him like, what if we met in New York City and go and see this concert? And we very spur of the moment just said, to heck with it, let's do it. And so we made the trip. We bought the plane tickets, hotel room, New York City adventure. We went to MoMA. It was great. And, but then I was there for the thing. And it's like, you're right. Nothing can ever compare to when Catherine Russell is literally, 30 feet from me, and I'm in a room with 120 people, and we all experienced her in the moment at that same time. Like it's a transcendent experience. And even though her records sound great, and she sounded very similar, like she is an artist who does, performs what she puts on her records, but the magic of being there in the moment was unlike anything else. And I will remember that in such a way, for the rest of my life. I think that it left me wanting more, that's the other part.
I think that progression that you talk about is wonderfully analogous to what we're talking about here on Stageable on how we can provide different pieces that get people excited. And especially with the AGC right now, we don't have shows you can come see. So this is your way to get connected from the ground up as we are building this thing. But imagine that we've got, 8 shows running simultaneously in all of our spaces over a weekend. Even if you are there, you're not going to be able to see everything in one weekend. So I think that theater people only embraced the technology of streaming. What's so funny is theater people have invested a lot of money in technology to be movies on stage. But when everything shut down, they did the pivot to do as many things as they could, from stage readings to showing archive footage. They saw this medium as something worth investing in when they couldn't do live shows. And as soon as they could do live shows again, they stopped caring about the connections they made to people who could only see them, only connect with them through the digital media. And so I do think that it requires theater makers to get creative, to think beyond what I do inside my theater is all that we really are. And to not see the technology of doing things online as either a threat or something less than, but to see it as more of those things that you experienced with that singer as entry places for different people in their own places, which also goes back to you talking about different audiences crave different things at different times based on who they are and where they are. So I think that we're on the precipice of something really exciting if theater makers could do the dual thing of make live theater again. Make live theater about theater of the imagination rather than theater of illusion. Try to make it about this thing that only theater can do. Do that as our core thing, and then try to invite as many people as possible into the community by reaching out through these boxes on screens in ways that you think feed the hunger of people who like this kind of stuff and want to connect, and this is their only way to connect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we're finding that together. You are a client of Stageable. You are on the Stageable team. AGC and Stageable.com are working together but we're still learning, and we're trying to figure out what the best way is to meet the audience wherever they are. And I think that is really, I think that the way that theater can thrive again is by focusing back on the audience and trying to figure out what would fulfill their needs and their desires. And I think people, after being disconnected through the pandemic and then more and more of life moving online because of its convenience, I think people are craving more and more in-person, exciting, engaging events. And I think the scary thing is that if we don't figure out how to support the people making those events and that live performing arts happen, if we don't support them, then everything is going to end up going toward the people with the big budgets already, the people who are Taylor Swift, who are Hollywood, who are the big budget people, and away from our communities.
Yeah, and I think that we're in a really tough situation because theater in America, and I don't want to speak about the world that I'm not as familiar with, but theater across our country here, hopefully there are international people watching this. So people in the United States is what I'm talking about. Um, Theater here has become for old rich white people. That's who can afford to go. That's who can afford to give donations. And that's that audience is shrinking because they're dying, because that's what happens when you get old. And they're not passing on their love of theater to younger generations. And theaters aren't creating stuff to get younger people excited for a price they can afford. Theater is privilege because it's so damn expensive. And that's not how theater started. Theater did not start being only for the rich and being priced in a way that you had to be rich to buy it. I mean, but the math also has to work, that you have to be able to charge a certain amount for a ticket, that when you sell X number of tickets, you can pay your people a living wage. And I think that's another reason why spending all the money on technology is stupid. If you spent less money on the technology, you would have more to spend on the people making it. And right now, theater is a bunch of gig workers. Theater is not people doing it full time in one place unless they work in the office. If you work in the office at a theater, then you are a full-time employee with benefits, with a salary, with vacation days, with sick days. Why don't actors have that? Why don't technicians have that? Why don't stage managers have that? We've got a really messed up system that needs to change. And that's part of what I'm trying to do with the American Globe Center. Because we get to start from nothing, because we get to build it from scratch, I'm working on the financial models that allow us to pay people full time, to pay people to live there, to not just hire actors on a contract for a few months, but to commit to continual employment for actors the same way you do for the marketing department or the development department. There shouldn't be this big chasm between the office and the theater. And it only exists because we built that system up. It does not have to exist. But it requires a rethinking of things and a respending of money. And to be honest, I'm trying to rethink the whole donor package, because that's why that theater in Stratford died, is because they didn't know how to run the theater. They ran a poor business that was supported by a bunch of rich donors who one by one died off. And when the last one died off, they didn't know how to make ends meet. And so they died. And so I think we have to rethink the model to be able to charge a reasonable price for tickets, not rely on donations, and pay people across the organization with a living wage. It's not easy, but it's not impossible. And it's doable on paper for the American Globe Center. So my job is to make that happen and turn it into a reality, to then be a model for other people to say, okay, well, we could do this piece of that or do that piece. And one of the things that we're talking about that I think is easily accessible for theaters today is how they hire actor educators to do workshops and do educational programming that can create the year-round employment. That is a source of income that can help change their current model that is very seasonally based. And to be honest, I don't feel like we're serving education as well as we could, and we're not serving the art as well as we could because of this gig worker situation. We can do it better if we plan it better.
Do you imagine that people will be like, we'll have multiple specialties? Like, would someone who is hired as an actor also handle part of marketing or have a seat on the marketing table, or how do you see crossover working in a new theater?
If you go to American Theater, their publication, American Theater Magazine, they published an article that I wrote during the pandemic. I think it got printed in October of 2020, where I laid out how theater needs to rethink itself as we go from lockdown to being open again. And I talked about that very thing on do we need to go back to what most companies did when they were small and starting out, where it was actors who did marketing, who did fundraising. It was we want to create a theater company and we don't have any money, so we have to do it all ourselves, from the selling of the shows to the performing of the shows. And lots of theater companies did that and then grew to a place where they could hire more people to do more of the jobs. Shakespeare and Company, the last time that I looked at them, and they're in the Berkshires in Lenox, Massachusetts, they still operated to some degree on this kind of way that you're talking about. I think that's a great possibility for some folks, depending on where they are in things. I think that is a legitimate way to go about it. And you certainly get a buy-in and a non-us versus them if us and them are the same group of people.
Yeah.
So I think that's possible. Yeah. I mean, part of what I'm trying to build with a Globe Theater that'll seat and stand 900, an indoor theater the big one that's going to have 900 plus seats, and a black box that has, maybe 100 to 150. I'm looking at trying to create rotating repertory in those three spaces that will require at least two troupes of actors who are doing nothing but acting to be able to make that happen. But that's also, from the beginning, a huge multi-million dollar budget that is not what every theater can afford to do. So, but I think that is a legitimate way for people to change the model that we are currently in, that is broken, that is not working, that is not sustainable, that when folks talk about theater coming back, it ain't coming back in a lot of places under that same model. If people are going to sit around waiting for that, I think they're going to die before that happens.
Well, so then that's a good transition to this question, which is, what do you think about the idea of a bit of natural selection here? And
it's happening.
Yeah. Is that a good thing?
It happened. Well, it happened in 2008 when the economy tanked, and the same thing happened then as happened post-pandemic lockdown, where the companies that survived 2008 and that survived after pandemic lockdown are the richest ones and the poorest ones. That it was the ones in the middle that had less ability. They were too big to be nimble like the smaller companies, but not big enough to withstand the shock to their system by not having any product to sell or anything that would generate income other than what the government was providing for a period of time. So, yeah, I do think there is that process of some places have died because they couldn't survive. I'm going to sound crass when I speak as directly as I can on this. If you can't pay your actors a living wage, you do not deserve to be a professional theater. If what you can do is be a community theater because you're getting volunteers, or you're only able to pay small stipends and people have to work outside, you may be able to create a model for yourself and your community that fits the best that you can do. But at this point, when theaters that are actually making hundreds of thousands of dollars or into the millions of dollars pay people full-time peanuts that are not a living wage, I don't know that they should be able to stay in business. I don't think I don't think it's not my choice. I'm not going to kill them. I bet they won't survive. And I think that's part of the unfair system that needs to change.
So I was recently talking to somebody, and they were saying how there was a company that was trying to do a Shakespeare show with, a shrunk cast. So
Right.
a play that needs 16 actors, and they were trying to do it with 8. And
Right.
I was like, oh man, that's too bad. And I was like, why are they doing that? And they was like, well, they can't afford all of the actors. And my response was, I don't think they can afford not to have all of the actors. Like, it's this misconception of, like, when is it an expense and when is it an investment? I mean, if theater and its core product being a play isn't first investing its money in the play, and the people who put the play on are the actors, we have a false dichotomy here. I mean, if you can't spend good money on great performers to make great art, where are you spending the money? That's what I don't understand.
Well, I've had more experience in the last 8 years since I left my old company in working with small companies who are doing those 8-person shows. And here's what I always hated those. When I was running my own company, I tried to figure out, well, if I'm doing a repertory of these 3 plays, how can I double and triple roles the way Shakespeare's company might have? How few actors can I have and still give that full experience? We don't know how many actors Shakespeare had. And so it could be that he had 15, 16, 17. He may have had 20. Shakespeare was a businessman, and he wouldn't have paid people he didn't have to pay. So I believe that they probably doubled and tripled and quadrupled on a regular basis for these plays, the histories and the tragedies that have 60 plus characters. But when is it too small? And what I often, if I were to write my autobiography right now, I would be searching for Baby Bear. It's not too much, not too little. What is the sweet spot? What is Baby Bear? And when I first started looking at Shakespeare scripts and trying to make it work for this small company that only has 8 actors, I created some cool stuff that is a different art form than when you are trying to recreate Shakespeare staging conditions. It's different. It can be, I think, really exciting. And I never thought that before I put my face, in the water and started to try to swim with it. Part of one of the books that I'm writing right now is editing Shakespeare scripts for different size casts and different lengths. So here's your full-length script for 15 actors. Here's your hour-and-a-half script for 10 actors. Here's your 8-person. And I even, for some workshop stuff for one company, I created hour-long 3-person shows. And those are just a different animal altogether. But because I'm me and because I've spent decades trying to crawl inside these plays, I feel like I'm able to take the essence of the play and not just choose a piece of that, but how can I do the whole play with these under these conditions, under these confines, under these, this number of actors. I'm a big believer that Hamlet is all of the things. Hamlet is a political play. It's a family play. It's a mystery play. It's a whodunit. It's all those things. And most people think, well, it's too long to do the whole play, so I have to chop off some of those arms or legs to make it fit. I think you can reduce that script and still tell that full story. And you can still have a Polonius who is wordy, who talks too much. If you cut Polonius too much, then you lose the essence of the character. So how do you cut it in a way that maintains that? So That's a long way of saying I no longer hate the small number of actors doing Shakespeare's plays, but I'm also a snob in that I feel like there are ways to reduce the scripts through what I would call liposuction rather than amputation. That rather than cutting this scene, and this scene, let's take a little out of this one, let's take a little out of that one. And actually, I think we have evidence from the time period that says that's what that Shakespeare's original company did. That what scholar Andrew Gurr calls the maximal text, the fullest version that we have available to us today, he would argue was never performed, and that Shakespeare wrote for his actors to reduce it, and we have some evidence of that being the case.
A director I worked with on Crucible, Gus K. Conan, said, "Our job is to tell the longest story possible in the shortest amount of time."
Right.
Right. I always that's stuck with me, and I think it speaks to what you were talking about just a moment ago, and what I think I see as the digital, my approach to the digital landscape, which is, how can I reduce this to its essence? How do I take away everything that is unnecessary, simplify and no more? I mean, get it down to exactly what it is. And, so that's, you maybe you need to take away some time from the play. And so you're reducing Polonius, but you have to be careful that you don't take something that is actually essential out of that character.
Right.
And I think for when we take events online, or when we offer any kind of digital content that is related to theater, it should still feel simplified. It should still be imaginative. It should still be engaging, and when possible, live.
Yeah, and you and I have talked a lot about this. I think part of the challenge for theaters trying to record live shows, trying to do the live streaming element, I think what we learned in the pandemic is it's hard. And especially if the kind of theater you're producing is about a give and take with audience, that the audience interaction is a huge part of the story you're telling every night. You've got to be able to have whatever you decide are enough cameras and positions that include that audience connection, includes actors talking to the camera so that they are talking to that person that's only seeing the live stream. How do we do that in a way that creates something that is not super high budget, but does what the Eras Tour did, which is put you there? How do we do that on a smaller scale? And I think that's a great challenge for us to do, not because we want to make $1 million selling tickets to live stream things, but we want to sell enough tickets to people who can't be there that they're going to want to be there when they can be. And so it's not just enough to say live stream your stuff, however good or bad you can do it. It's got to be more thoughtful than that. But I think it's absolutely possible. And this comes from a guy that's old enough that I said, screw that. We're never going to be doing that because we're about only the live experience. That is a dumb way of thinking. And here I am. I'm old enough to say that way of thinking that I did was dumb. And there are better ways to think about it now that achieve the goal of creating community and taking audiences on these rides and doing it in as many ways as possible to connect with as wide an audience as possible who will dig it. And so it's a tricky thing. When is it good enough? When is it not good enough? When is this approach works on this level and this level, but not on enough levels? How do we get creative to find those solutions? And I think we can. And more than that, I kind of think we have to. If we don't, then we're missing out And we are limiting our missions, and we are limiting the scope of what we're doing. I am all for theaters reaching into their own local communities more and more and more. I think that's something that is happening now for a lot of different reasons, and I'm in favor of that. But there are people who get to be a part of that audience and they don't live there, or people who used to be able to come and now they can't come anymore. How do we connect with all of them with something that feels like it matters in our mission and can allow folks to join us on the ride, and that we can all experience it together?
Yeah. And, in an era where the lowest common denominator, entertainment, the shortest attention span, the swiping and that degrading both our attention spans and our intellects. And I think there's a responsibility for artists to flood the digital medium with things that are challenging, interesting, engaging, and of higher quality than the average social media scroll. And I think at least providing that option to people is a noble effort, and saying, look, there's better ways to do it. And if right now you need to sit at home and experience it through a screen, okay, but wait till you see what it's like when you come and join us in person. Wait till you feel what it's like when the performer is staring right into your eyeballs and delivering a line to you. So I think we've got a lot of experimentation to do, a lot of things to learn. I think it's a brand new art form, and I think it connects directly back to just the importance of what theater has always done, which is connect us to one another and to humanity. And I'm really excited to explore all of this with you, Jim.
I stole a quote many, many years ago, and I bastardized it so much that I can't even say, and this is the person that I read it, who originally said it. But I believe very strongly that exposure to great art, Shakespeare in particular, because of what I do, but exposure to great art allows us exposure to our humanity. And with Shakespeare plays, seeing all different pieces of our humanity, who we are, who we strive to be, who we don't want to be, our families, our friends, our political leaders, the people that we love, people that we really don't love, by being exposed to all of that stuff, that allows us to be better people. And that night after night, if seeing plays can expose people to humanity and make us better people, then we're making the world a better place by just doing plays. And even a floofy light play is going to reveal humanity and give us stuff to revel in. And man, do I want to make the world a better place. And I think that using the digital medium will allow us to do that even wider and farther and better. And shouldn't we all be trying to do that? I vote yes.
That's great, Jim. I just want to thank you so much for joining me here today, and for all the work that you're doing at American Globe Center. Go ahead and drop a website so they can find you.
AmericanGlobeCenter.org.
Right. You can find them on Stageable too, stageable.com/American-Globe-Center. They're on both platforms, and you can learn all about them and ways that you can support by either joining and being a member, or making a donation, or just following along with them and seeing how things progress. I can't wait to see what the coming years bring and what all you make. Thanks again for joining me today.
We're doing lots of cool stuff together, Benjamin. So everyone keep following the Stageable space, because we're going to be doing it all together there.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day, and we will catch you soon.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Bye now.